There, it's Patricia Young. Wanted to jump on and talk to you about the negative messaging that we receive as deep thinkers, deep feelers, also known as highly sensitive people, how we internalize these messages and then we use it to beat up on ourselves. Last night and yesterday, well, this week actually, was week 3 of the online HSP courses. And this week we really focused on what are the negative messages that you received and how can we take those messages and turn them into true statements that really honor how we are as highly sensitive people. I really believe that when we can take these statements and turn them around and start changing those messages, that this is how it leads us to being educated and empowered HSPs. So I want to go through, it's a pretty exhaustive list. I'm not sure how long I'm going to do this, but it feels like this really warrants a little bit more time and attention because I hear from people so much how much this comes up for them. And so I'm thinking that if you have the time and your willingness to stick around and hang out through this whole live, that you may identify or hear some of the messages that you hear, and you may be able to hear some of the corrective statements. There is no one right corrective statement. It's really important for you to figure out what resonates for you, because based on our wounding, we're all going to need to hear something different. So I'm going to be looking at my notes and let's see how this goes. So one of the things somebody said is, I overreact, and we looked at that. So the corrective statement could be, I have strong reactions, I have deep feelings, I have convictions about things. So there's not shame in if somebody says you overreact. One of the other things that came up is, I'm too controlling. So we talked about controlling comes from two places, either fear, that we're afraid that things aren't going to work out, we're not going to get our needs met, we're not going to be safe, we're not going to be taken care of. Or it can also be coming from a place of discernment that I'm really clear about what works for me and what I want. And so we addressed it in those two different ways. So it could be, I'm safe, the universe has my back. If you have spiritual beliefs, it could be, hey, Selma, hey, Donna. It could be that, you want to say God or the universe or whatever your belief is, but I'm safe, the universe has my back, I can trust. Or if you're coming from a place of discernment, you can say, I have clear expectations. I'm detail-oriented. I'm a people pleaser. So we can care about how other people feel. We can care about how other people feel. And so that can be part of the statement, I'm a caring person. Or we can also say, it's okay for me to take care of myself. It's not my job to take care of others. Other people need to take care of themselves. I'm a delicate flower, or I'm fragile. And we talked about what this meant to the person, and what they came up with is, I'm wickedly strong. And oftentimes our sensitivity, if we're tearful, if we have deep feelings about things, people are uncomfortable with that and they view us as being weak. A lot of people said it feels like people have to walk around on eggshells. The truth is, having our feelings, crying, feeling emotional takes a tremendous amount of courage. And I know a lot of people who've done some pretty deep work and they're not comfortable going near their feelings. So I love that. I'm wickedly strong. I'm way too soft. And we examine that. So what we came up with is, I'm caring, I'm compassionate. Then we have the too much and not enough. And many highly sensitive people have gotten these messages of, I'm either too much or I'm not enough. And we see this in the extreme. I do too much or I'm too lazy. So with the I talk too much. I love to connect. I talk just the right amount. And then the follow-up for that was, no one cares. And so it's like, what I have to share is important. I have meaningful things to share. I have value. I'm lazy. So often what happens is we overdo. We feel like we have to show up and participate like everybody else. We overdo it, and then we get over-aroused, overstimulated, depleted. And then we can't do very much because we're trying to get replenished. So looking at that in terms of polarization. And so it's like, I'm honoring where I'm at. It's okay for me to listen to myself. It's okay for me to listen to my body. I'm too sensitive. So the counter to that is, I feel deeply. I'm just right. This was another big one, that belief of I'm flaky. And again, we had to talk about, are we honoring what our needs are? So if I look at the course of a week or a weekend, what is realistic for me to do? And what this person has shared, it's similar to what I said before, is that they really wanted to be doing all these things that everybody else was doing. It didn't really honor who they are. And so they'd make commitments and then not be able to follow through, or they would mistakenly double book. And then it brings up this sense of like, I'm not dependable, people can't count on me. And for the most part, as highly sensitive people, we really tend to have this sense of over responsibility. We really want to be able to show up to our commitments. And so what we talked about is I'm learning how to honor what my needs are. And we talked about some ways that we can communicate if we're not sure if we're going to be able to show up for something, or leaving things tentative, and really learning what our capacity is, because when we don't have that awareness, we do overdo, and then we kind of can't do anything because we've done too much. Then going to I'm perfectionistic. And so again, this can be about being detail oriented and knowing that it's okay to change my mind. So I'm just looking at my notes here. So what I heard from a lot of the people that are introverted is they've gotten messages of like, what's wrong with you? You're too quiet. You don't share. You're too closed off. And so what we talked about is we have a right to choose how much we share. And just because we're not verbally participating in a group or a meeting doesn't mean that we're not actively engaged. And for the people that are introverted and relate to this, that it's very possible that internally they're really processing and digesting. Introverts often need more time to really chew things apart. They're not going to, in general, be quick to respond verbally because they're really processing. But there's such a mistake that they're angry, they're upset, they're standoffish, they don't care. They're actively engaged. It just looks different. And our society is so focused on the extroverts and doing that it really doesn't honor the introverts. So I'm just going to switch my notes over here and see what else I have, because I've got copious notes. So another thing that we came up with for You're So Quiet is I come up with the best ideas. I'm contemplative, I'm thoughtful, I'm impactful. So again, if you're someone who's introverted and you've received negative messages about how you show up in the world, there are things that you can tell yourself that really support who you are and how you show up, and you shouldn't have to be a verbal processor if you're someone who likes to take more time. I'm too much. So we often hear this. So how about I'm just enough? I'm just right. I have emotional intelligence. And then somebody said, you're so fascinating. And I just love that. I don't fit in. And many of us have felt like we're misfits, we're disruptors, we're truth tellers. So somebody suggested variety is a spice of life. Or I'm not going to compromise myself so I don't fit in. Or it could just be like, I fit in with the people that get me. That there are going to be places where people are really going to get us and appreciate us, and there are places where people are not going to get us, and that's okay. I think because we tend to like that sense of connection and belonging and harmony, it can be really undoing. One of the people was talking about their child plays a particular sport, and so this mom is with groups of moms when their child plays a sport, and the moms are just not really her thing. So she has a sense of not fitting in and not belonging, but wanting that, but these aren't her people. And so how do you rectify that? And how can you communicate with yourself so that you know that you fit in and belong, but maybe just not with this group? Thanks, Anna. So another one is you think too much. And I was always told, you think too much, you analyze too much, you worry too much. Well, we have a more active insula. So we are going to be troubleshooting, forecasting, projecting. There's nothing wrong with that. And we also talk about this in terms of what does it mean for the other person? So if somebody says you think too much, it might be that the message that they're not saying is, you know, I don't think about things so deeply. I operate in 1 gear and you operate in 5 gears. And when you talk about what's going on, I feel overwhelmed. I feel inadequate. I don't think about things that way. I don't know how to process. I don't know how to relate. And it makes me feel really uncomfortable. Generally, people don't have that level of awareness. They don't share on that level. So what we hear is you think too much, you worry too much, you analyze too much. It's kind of like, I'm uncomfortable with how you show up in the world. And instead of me owning this, I'm just going to put it on you and make something that's wrong about you. So that's a really important part of this, that we really need to look at when people give us these messages. We can say, what does that mean for you? What does that bring up for you that I think too much or I analyze too much? Generally, people are not able to give us a really in-depth answer, but even that can be an indication that it's about them and not us. And I'd say 99% of the time, it's really about the other person projecting what they feel uncomfortable onto us. And because we've received so much negative messaging, we just take it on and feel like it really is about us, which is why figuring out what our negative statements are and coming up with corrective statements so that when somebody does come at us with, you think too much, you're too sensitive, we go like, yeah, what does that bring up for you? Okay, thanks for sharing. Knowing that I'm okay with how I show up and you don't have to be okay with it. So I'm going to look and see what else I've got in my notes here. If people knew me, they wouldn't like me. And so, I think that what that speaks to is a sense of vulnerability that, especially as highly sensitive people, because we were told not to feel so much, not to show up the way that we were, we end up kind of having, I'm going to hit the mic, so I'm trying to be careful. We end up kind of covering our vulnerability, and we show up with, what I call our Stepford, I'm going to call them Stepford people because I notice my language is gender biased and I'm really working on that. So our Stepford people, I'm fine, I'm great, everything's good. We don't want to show people what's going on inside because we've been hurt by doing that before. We obviously want to share with people that are safe, that we can trust. But what happens is we end up feeling like if we were to open and expose ourselves, people wouldn't like us. And when we have safe people that we can share with, in that kind of messy middle where we're kind of being raw and vulnerable, that's really where connection takes place. And so much of why the groups are so helpful is people have a chance to experience that. We had a group last week where a member was going through something pretty intense and really allowed us to see her vulnerability and her pain. And I asked the other people in the group, how was that for you? And everybody said like they felt really connected. And then it allowed another person who tends to be pretty guarded to open up and share something very similar. And so what we often protect and feel like if I showed anybody this part of me that they would run screaming is really where that deep connection is. And as highly sensitive people, we crave that meaning and connection and that depth and that empathy. But when we don't allow ourselves to experience it, we don't show it to others, we end up having this sense of disconnection, and it can be really challenging. So Donna says, I believe that you can be both extrovert and introvert. Yeah, I have an episode coming up with Jacqueline Strickland where we talk about this. I'm trying to think of how much I want to go into it. I think much of what's been written about introversion really is about the highly sensitive person. So if you're familiar with the trait of high sensitivity and you see articles around introversion, you want to make sure that it includes those 4 core characteristics of depth of processing, overstimulation, overarousal, empathy and emotional responsiveness, and sensitive to subtleties, because those are often overlapped. And I think that we have the ability, I'm a highly sensitive extrovert. You're not going to find me in loud venues with lots of people. I want it to be a small venue where it's quiet. I want to have deep, meaningful conversation. I'm good for a certain amount of time. I can't be doing this all day long. So I think that there's a lot of confusion about introversion, extroversion. We need to tease out the highly sensitive introverts and the non-highly sensitive introverts. If you're interested in an article, and I will try and remember to post it below, it's called Introversion, Extroversion, and the Highly Sensitive Person by Jacqueline Strickland. If you go to Dr. Aaron's website, hsperson.com, and you search for it, it will come up. It's an amazing article, and I find that there's so much misinformation around introversion and extroversion. Okay, so I'm just looking. So another person talked about, I'm really slow at getting my work done. I feel like I don't do my work quick enough. And I said, well, what kind of feedback do you get from your supervisor? That I'm really thorough, that I do a great job. So again, sometimes as highly sensitive people, we want to work and really be thorough in what we do. And we tend to be very conscientious. We're very dependable workers. We're very thorough. And so we talked about turning that around and know, like, I'm thorough and I do a good job. So again, we have these negative messages that we give ourselves. And for this person in their job, they're not getting feedback that they're taking too long to do things. So again, this is how we can internalize things. And even though the reality changes, that it's not a problem in their job, they're still feeling like what they're doing is not okay. Donna says, thank you. So I'm just looking at my last page of notes here. These notes, I did not keep the messages in line with what the traits were. So I'm just going to read some of the traits. It's hard to be in my body. I'm a burden. I'm a fraud. I'm too sensitive. I've learned to shut it down. I can't trust how I react. I don't have the right reaction. I stuff my feelings. I'm too much. I take on too much responsibility. I blame myself too much. My emotions are too much. It's not okay to take up space. I don't feel anything. I use my emotions to manipulate. So some of the corrective statements that we talked about is my emotions are mine. I'm here and I'm present. There's as much space in the world as I need. I have a right to be here and to take up space. I'm insightful. I have a deeper knowing about things. I'm a gift. I contribute sensitivity to my relationships. I'm lucky I know how I feel. I have a unique and insightful perspective. My intuition is valuable. I can trust my feelings and reactions. My emotions help me to feel deeply and feel connected. All my feelings are okay. So my hope is that if you've been listening and if this resonates with you, that if you have negative messaging, and we have it all the time and it's so subtle, I don't think we even realize it. And somebody had said something last night and I said, would you tell that to anybody else? And they're like, oh, heck no. So the way that we allow ourselves to talk to ourselves, we wouldn't talk to anybody else that way. And if we want to be empowered and educated, highly sensitive people that really kind of build up that muscle of honoring how we show up in the world and embracing our emotions. It's not about changing and getting tougher or getting thicker skin. It's about really embracing how we're wired. The first place that we really need to work on is being very mindful and curious about what do we tell ourselves? What is that internal dialogue that's going on, to write those things down and to see if you can't come up with corresponding corrective statements that really honor how you're wired. If you are stuck, if you need any help, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Most of you know I have a podcast called Unapologetically Sensitive. It's all about the highly sensitive person. I really believe that the world needs highly sensitive people. We have so many gifts to offer the world, and it's important for us to become educated so that we can educate others, so that the gifts that we have will really spread out in the world. I hope you found this helpful. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.